Let's talk RFIDs or more stupid people in the news. This is Alan with Quarter Horse Arms, and in this podcast, I want to discuss a stupid Maryland delegate. And at the same time, I guess I need to start considering whether I change my affiliation from Democrat to unaffiliated. I'm certainly not in that mindset to become a Republican, but here's why. All right, RFIDs, or radio frequency identifications, are commonly used. They've been used for probably 40 years, maybe even longer. Mostly they're used for inventory control. It's got a little signal thingy, and when a reader comes within range of it, it sends a signal. So if you're doing inventory control, it makes inventory much easier to be done, I guess. So how does this affect firearms? Well, this has come up, previously. And I mean more than a decade ago. So what we're looking at is a proposal from Pamela Queen, who's a Democrat delegate in Maryland. And so with RFIDs, they're talking about essentially Big Brother. And there's a whole bunch of issues with this. Basically, her proposal or her law or whatever the hell you want to call it, says bulk firearm transfers must have RFIDs permanently affixed to each gun. They cannot be removed without disabling the gun, and if you do, it's like a $2,500 fine. So, how do you do it? Well, that's a damn good question. And so I did some research and came up with a whole bunch of things that, are troubling. First off, this is just another example to me of a gun control whack job making a proposal that's unfeasible, and it's unworkable, and it's dangerous. And you're going, hey, Alan, how is it dangerous? Well, it's funny you should ask. Let's go into this a couple of ways. All right, so even the people that have designed these things claim that they're technologically unfeasible. More than a decade ago, I think, the Obama administration and had directed the Department of Justice to see if they could come up with something. And they couldn't create one. They couldn't find a working prototype that wasn't flawed. The other thing that kicks in is, who's going to pay for this? It's certainly not going to be the government. And it certainly isn't going to be the gun manufacturers. It's going to be you. So if you have to put a battery in there and you have to put the signal thing, and, give you an example of an RFID is the little sticky thing you put on your windshield to go through a toll booth. Now, some of you might have the big boxy thing, but you can get a little RFID thing that when you go through the toll booth, it automatically reads or triggers a read so that you can have that amount of money deducted from your account. So, it's another or newer version of an Easy Pass. So, to get back to it, who's going to pay? You are, meaning us, the consumers. Which brings up, economic bias again. If you look at some of the states and some of the legislators, and I don't necessarily want to use the term liberal, but let's say the more liberal group, when they're looking at no cash bond for when you've been arrested, you can't afford bail, you'd sit in jail until your trial. Well, the no cash bond thing, I know some states are working with it. or experimenting with it, and a lot of the results have been bad. But the idea was to level the playing field, whether you could afford to pay or not. Now, if you're going to do that with firearms, that's economic bias. You're now going to raise the cost of the firearms potentially beyond what most people could afford to pay, or many people could afford to pay. So, again, you're making a firearm, or firearm ownership, rather, a privilege for the more economically advantaged. So, not fair. Current technology for RFIDs is easily defeatable, including statements from one of the guys, I think it was in a white paper. I can't remember if it was that or if it was some other article I read. He said it won't work. So what this involves is, having some sort of RFID thing in your firearm. All right, well, if it's a rifle with a traditional stock, I imagine there's plenty of room to put it in there. But if you think about a revolver or a semi-automatic pistol, there's not a lot of room to play with in there. You could probably put it in the grip for a semi-automatic pistol, but then how are you going to load the damn thing? So what it involved was, either in a watch or a ring, or even putting an implant in your skin, it would enable the gun to be fired. Well, what about offhand shooting? Might create a problem. So now let's say I have to shoot around the corner, which, hopefully I won't have to. But, if I'm left-handed and I'm reaching around the right side of a doorway and I put the gun in my right hand, what if it doesn't work? I could get dead. That wouldn't be happy for me. Okay. The other thing is the RFID signals can be blocked. So if you know that somebody's got RFID guns and you have a jammer, essentially, you can disable the guns that might actually be used to defend against you. And so the other thing, too, by the way, is you can clone the dopey things. So I could theoretically create a clone. And in fact, I watched a YouTube video with some security experts that actually did that. They made a clone of the RFID on a gun, stuck the RFID in the gun case, and it showed that the gun was still in the case. And in the case of the Maryland law, they were directing the state police or some state agency to monitor wherever the gun goes. And that creates a whole bunch of other issues. And here's where, it gets a little odd. So there's a whole bunch of states that either have bans or are considering bans for RFIDs. And the basis is privacy laws. It's not the government's job to monitor what I do. And then so what you wind up dealing with are potentially 3 or 4, actually call it 4 amendments. Second Amendment, right to keep and bear arms. Well, they're trying to impede that or block that. However, when you start looking at things like the 14th Amendment, which says no state shall abridge privileges or rights of citizens, including life, liberty, and property, and the right to due process. So they're going to collect information on me, and I haven't done anything wrong. So there's no due process. They're just trying to arbitrarily make a law. Fourth Amendment, illegal search. Again, I haven't done anything wrong except take my gun out of the gun safe and maybe carry it, or, put it in the car or a range bag and go to a range and shoot. Whose business is it? And that essentially would be illegal search. Again, not having done anything illegal, they have no business tracking me. And then you kind of step a little bit into the Fifth Amendment, which is your right to remain silent, your right to not self-incriminate. Well, it seems to me if they're attempting to require guns that have to have RFID emitters, and I don't put one on, it's their job to catch me, not my job to tell them, I'm not doing it. The hell with you. Okay, so what we're dealing with are some state laws. We're dealing with some constitutional issues. So Bill of Rights stuff. The other thing that you've got to keep in mind, besides cloning these, there's a security risk with these. If you recall, going back a couple of years, there were people at stores like Walmart with RFID readers or chip readers trying to pull your bank information off of your credit cards. And many of you, if you're like me, have an RFID blocking wallet. Easy enough to defeat the technology if I can do that with a wallet. Imagine what I could do if I really get irritated. The other thing too is, when you look at it from a military perspective, some of the services have experimented with RFID technology. The problem is that if you have a sensitive enough reader, you can find out when people are coming near you. So, let's say, for example, you're some kind of insurgent or terrorist or foreign military, and you have this going, oh, wow, we got a bunch of guys with guns coming at us. All right, so first off, you're tipping them off. And second, they take a blocker or a jammer and disable all of your weapons within, let's say, several hundred feet. So you're creating dangerous situations. So I swear to God that at some point I'm going to have to make a podcast category or chapter and just label it stupid shit in the news. Proposing a law that can't be done is just stupid. And in a previous podcast, I talked about the fact that you've got gun rights versus gun control people just slamming heads. Nobody's willing to even give an inch, because the second you do that, the risk is that you're going to wind up throwing more out there. And I understand that. Because what are the gun rights people, the gun owners, the legal possessors of firearms? I just want to have my guns. I want to be able to go places and shoot them. And if I want to, and I have the right licensing, I want to be able to carry my gun when and where I want. And the gun control people are going, hey, let's come up with some sort of law that if we can sneak it past and do something incredibly stupid and operate on the assumption that all of us gun owners are a basket of deplorables. I hope you remember that from a previous election. You're going to keep butting heads. How about a voice of reason? The other thing that you would do, in fact, and it occurred to me as I was doing some research, is if you're going to require me to have an RFID in my guns, you may push legal gun owners to potentially do what would amount to illegal things if that law goes into effect. So if they're going to put that into effect in Maryland, maybe I got a friend in Pennsylvania. Hey, Billy Bob, can I bring my guns to you for a little while? And then once the law shows, hey, we're compliant now, I'll bring my guns back. not one of them will have an RFID.